Okay, so students, we've been working in chapter 9, and we're working with this idea of systems of equations. And the last 2 days, we've spent 2 different ways on how to solve systems of equations. And we saw graphing, and we saw substitution. Now today, we're going to look at this idea of story problems with 2 variables. So if you look up here, when we were back in chapters 3 and 4 and we were doing problems, and let's say we had this story problem right here. It says Carla has 15 coins, all dimes and nickels worth $1.40. How many nickels does she have? Now if you remember, when we did these back in chapter 3 and 4, we used charts. Okay, and we were in, and so we would say, okay, I'm looking for nickels. So we said, okay, we're going to let n equal nickels. And then remember, how did we figure out dimes? Well, remember, we had to use the idea of 15 minus n is the number of dimes. And we did that a lot. We did, remember the celery and carrot problem, and we even did that with our mixture problems back in chapter 7. And so, because we could only have one variable in our equation, and then we said the nickels plus the dimes equals $1.40. Well, now that we are in chapter 9, we can have 2 variables. But now the problem is, if we have 2 variables, then we have to have 2 equations. We need a system of equations. But look what happens now. I can let n equal nickels, and I can let d equal dimes, and then I can look back up here at my story problem. Well, we have a total of 15 coins, so we can say nickels plus dimes equals 15, and we know we have $1.40, so we can say 5 times every nickel plus 10 times every dime gives me the total value. So we're going to see now we can actually use 2 different variables in our story problem if we're in chapter 9, but I have to do 2 equations. So let's see how that's going to play out today as we look at our story problem. So once again, as usual, we're doing story problems, so we're going to do the 5-step plan. So if you notice, I've got the 5 steps already listed on the slide. And so it says solve using 2 equations and 2 variables. So remember, we're going to read through the words, we're going to be a good detective, and we're going to look for our operator words. So when I look here, it says the sum of 2 numbers is 5. Okay, the sum, that should tell us something. Theirs is, okay, the sum of 2 numbers is 5. The larger number exceeds twice the smaller by 14. Find the numbers. Okay, so step number 1, what are we looking for? Well, step number 1, what are we looking for? We're trying to find the numbers. Now, what numbers are we looking for? We need a larger number, and we need a smaller number. Okay? And again, where did I get those labels from? I pulled them right out of my story problem. So, once again, now that I've decided that I need a larger number and a smaller number, now we've got to use our let statements. Remember, our let statements is what defines our variables. Okay, so let's go here. I'm going to go ahead and make the smaller number be x, and I'm going to let the larger number be y. Kind of did that a little backwards, but it works. All right. So now I need 2 equations. Now most of the time your 2 equations are going to come from 2 sentences. So look at the first sentence. It says, this is sentence number 1, it says that the sum of 2 numbers is 5. Well, how would we write that? Yes, the sum, okay, sum means addition. The smaller number plus the larger number is, we know is means equal, is 5. So that's my first equation. Now, how are we going to come up with our second equation? Okay, well, let's look at the second sentence. It says the larger number exceeds twice the smaller number by 14. Now, they kind of put a little trick on us there. It says the larger number exceeds, so that's kind of going to be our equal sign. Now, which letter is our larger number? Yeah, look at our let statements, that's y. So y exceeds, or it equals, twice the smaller number by 14. Well, how would we write that? Twice the smaller number by 14. Now, see how we're a good detective and we did a good job, okay, finding those clue words. Now, we have our two different equations. Now, how do we solve those? Now, again, when I look here, substitution is the way to go. How do I know substitution is the way to go? Oh, we've already got y isolated. Okay, now I'm going to go to the next slide because I think it's blank and it gives me some room to work. So we've got x plus y equals 5. That was equation number 1. And our second equation was y equals 2x plus 14. Okay? All right, so now we're going to solve the equations. Well, again, we've already said y is isolated, so I'm going to substitute that in over here. So we've got x plus y is 2x plus 14 equals 5. All right, so now what do? Isolate the variable by inverse operations. We can actually collect like terms here. X and 2x is 3x plus what? 14 equals 5. Who's my floater now? Who needs to move to the other side? Yeah, let's subtract 14 from both sides. And so now I have 3x equals negative 9. Well, we still need to divide both sides by 3 to get x alone. And so we're going to get x equals negative 3. Okay, x equals negative 3. Now, remember, I found x. X is the smaller number, but the question said find both numbers. So how am I going to find the larger number? Yeah, we're going to go back up here, use our y equation. So we've got y equals 2. X was negative 3 plus 14. So now I've got negative 6 plus 14. What's negative 6 plus 14? Yep, it is 8. Okay, so we need to answer the question now. Okay, we need to answer the question. All right, and so we would say the smaller number, okay, was x equals negative 3. And then the larger number, well, that was y equals 8. And now, what do you got to remember to do at the end? We've got to do a check. Well, let's plug them into one of the equations. Well, we know x plus y equals 5. What's negative 3 plus 8? Yes, so there's our check. So remember, whenever we do our story problems, we're back to chapter, those 5-step story problems we learned back a while back. All right, now let's go ahead and look at another equation. Again, it says solve using 2 equations and 2 variables. A bank teller has 112 $5 bills and $10 bills for a total of $720. How many of each does the teller have? Now we're going to see a reoccurring theme here. Most of the time when they want us to do these story problems, we're kind of looking at the number of things, okay, and also the value of things. All right, so if you look here, we're talking about the number of bills. We've got 112 $5 bills and $10 bills. And then the total of all those bills, when I put them together, is $720. So do you see what I mean by numbers of things and value of things? So what are we trying to find? Well, we've got to find how many, oh, Mrs. Burton didn't spell that right, how many bills, $5 or $10 of each. Okay, so we have to have both of them. So let's define our variables. All right, so I'm going to let X be $5 bills, and I'm going to let Y be $10 bills. So now, as I look at that, what two equations? Well, if we look at the first sentence, it talks about numbers of things. How many total bills does the bank teller have? Yeah, 112. So we know $5 bills plus the $10 bills equals 112. And then when we go to get our second equation that has to do with the value of the things, well, if X is my $5 bills, 5 times however many bills I have, plus my $10 bills, 10 times the number of bills, equals, and what was the total value? 720. Okay, does that make sense? And again, we're going to see that over and over as we go through and do these story problems. We're going to talk about the numbers of things and the values of things. Now, I'm going to go ahead and go to the next slide where I have some extra space. And let's go ahead and write our equations up here again. Okay, $5 bills and $10 bills equals 112 bills in the bank teller's drawer. And then the value of things. Okay, $5 bills are worth $5, makes sense. $10 bills are worth $10, and we have a total of $720. Now, we need to figure out who to solve for. Now, substitution's the only method we know right now, so you actually have a choice. Okay, we could solve for X, or we could solve for Y. It doesn't matter. And since we need to figure out what both of them are, it doesn't matter. So I think that I'm just going to go ahead and solve for Y. If I solve for Y, I'm going to have Y equals 112 minus X. And now we're going to do what we did last night for homework. We're going to substitute that value for every time I see a Y in my equation. So when I look there, I've got 5x plus 10 times 112 minus x equals 720. Everybody understand what we did? This got plugged in for zoop, y, and then we just put the rest of the equation around it. Now, what do you think we should do next? Yes, good job. We got to take care of that distributive property. So we know 10 times 112, and now you kind of see why I did y's, because it's easier to multiply, minus 10x equals 720. Let's combine like terms here, and that's going to give me negative 5x plus equals 720. Yeah, we need to subtract our floater 120. Now, because they're different signs, I'm going to have a negative answer. So when we subtract 120, or 1,120 from 720, what do we get? That works out pretty nice. Do you see it's going to be what, negative 400? And then if we divide both sides by 5, okay, because we got to get x alone, divide both sides by 5. Negative divided by negative is a positive, so we've got x equals 80. Okay, now I found x. Remember, x is my $5 bills. Now I need to find my $10 bills. So we're going to go back up here and use one of these equations. You know me, I'm going to go here, okay, because I know that y equals 112 minus x, which is 80. So y equals, what happens if I subtract those two? Yeah, we get 32. All right, so now make sure you answer the question. All right, we know $5 bills, X equals 80. $10 bills, that was Y, equals 32. So there's my answer. What's the last thing I need here? Yeah, I need to have a check. What's the easiest way to check? Well, if I add both of those together, what do we get? 112, and that checks with the first equation, x plus y equals 112. So tonight for homework, you have a few story problems to do. You're going to use 2 variables, and you're going to do 2 equations, and we'll sit and talk through them tomorrow. Great job.